The rider on the white horse, I believe, is that seventh king who comes out as a warrior, conquering and to conquer, who actually is a victorious warrior, which is why he is given the Stephanos crown. I believe that the seventh king is going to be involved in some way in that war that takes place in Israel just prior to the time when believers are changed and before we are actually caught up to God and to his throne. He'll be riding here. And even though he's here, and even though he's probably riding during this whole time, he is not going to be given a crown until we're actually in heaven, till we've been raptured, brought into the throne room of God, where the Lamb takes the scroll and begins to open the seals. That first seal that he opens causes the four living creatures, at least one of them anyway, to call out to that horseman to come. He has a bow, and he is at that time given a crown, that the crown of the victor, and he's told that he can go out conquering and to conquer. So he's going to continue riding as that warrior, only he is now a kind of a warrior king, sort of a counterfeit of Christ in Revelation chapter 19. So if the rider on the white horse is a person, an actual person, what about the riders on the other horses? And this is a great question. People have asked me this question before, and personally, I think that those other riders are actual entities. So the rider on the next horse comes out on a bright red, or we might even consider blood red horse. And this is what the scriptures say about him. When he opened the second seal, that is when Christ opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword. All right, so is this an actual entity, or are we just talking symbols here? Are we just talking a symbolic horse with a symbolic rider and, symbolic death? No, I don't think so. I think though the horse might be symbolic of an animal that carries its rider with swiftness and, expediency, I think the rider is actually going to be real, a real entity. And here's the reason why. I did a video not too long ago on angels, and I'll leave a link for that in the description box. We know that God delegates authority. This is how he operates. This is kind of how he has operated sort of throughout time, whether in spiritual realms or here on earth. In fact, he's given the dominion of the earth to people. People were created to take care of the earth and to be basically kings over the earth. Now, what's happened and what's going to happen is there are people who are going to side with Satan and the beast, who have legitimate authority over the earth because they're people. And then there are other people like you and me who don't want to side with the beast or Satan or with the harlot or anybody other than Christ. And we also, because of the virtue, the fact that we're humans, have dominion over the earth. But the big question is, are people going to have dominion over the earth under Satan, or is it going to be under God? And that's what the big battle is about the end times. It's who is going to follow Satan and the beast and the false prophet, and who is on the Lord's side. And this is sort of the big dividing line throughout history is, who is on the Lord's side? And you and I, we want to be on the Lord's side. So there are other aspects of creation that God has given dominion to, and I cover a lot of this in that video on angels. And Revelation talks a lot about angels. It talks more about angels than any other book in the Bible. We know there's an angel of water, there's an angel of over the fire, there are angels who are messenger angels like Gabriel. We know there's a warrior angel like Michael. From the book of Daniel, we also know that Michael is the prince or the guardian or the protector of Israel. We also know from Daniel that there is a prince or spiritual power or authority that has power over Persia, over that territory. There's another one that's over Greece. And so we know that there are principalities and beings that operate or are at the top of those chains of hierarchy who are in control of these various places and things. And not all who are in control or who have been given authority are good. Not all of them follow the Lord. We know that Satan is the prince of the power of the air, and it would seem that Satan, in addition to being the accuser of the brethren, he is given authority over the atmosphere, over the air. And the beast is going to be given authority over the earth and be given Satan's authority, his power, his throne, and his great authority. We know that there are 4 living creatures who are in heaven who are responsible for basically protecting God's sacred space. They're the guardians of his space. We know that there are 4 other living creatures that are actually below the firmament who are responsible for time, for the Mazzaroth, and this is something that we read about in Ezekiel chapter 1. And because God has entrusted various aspects of his creation, including realms, spiritual realms, and things that we can't see, as well as things that we can see here on earth. He's entrusted them to entities, to powers and principalities. It's highly probable, highly likely that God also has an angel or an entity over death. There's one who is probably over Hades, and there is probably an angel who is responsible for maintaining the earth's food supply at a certain level, and another angel who is able to take away peace. So these are all entities or powers or principalities or hierarchies or some level of spiritual entities, spiritual entities who've been given authority over various aspects, that when the seals are opened, the first 4 seals are opened, that they will be given permission to do what it is that they've been called to do. Some of this stuff will be things that they've been wanting to do, that they're just chomping at the bit, hoping that they can do, because most of these are like wicked entities. But some of them, like the rider on the black horse, the one who is responsible for price controls over food. Now, it's possible that you could get rid of all the wheat and all the barley, but we're told that the rider on the black horse is going to have a parameter that he has to maintain as far as the food supply goes. So we know that in the Old Testament there are 4 angelic horsemen in Zechariah chapter 1 whose job it is to patrol the earth and to report on what they see. And this is in Zechariah 1, 8, verses 8 through 11. And I saw in the night, and behold, a man riding on a red horse. He was standing among the myrtle trees in the glen, and behind him were red, sorrel, and white horses. And then I said, What are these, my Lord? And the angel who talked with me said to me, I will show you what they are. So the man who was standing among the myrtle trees answered, These are they whom the Lord has sent to patrol the earth. And they answered the angel of the Lord who was standing among the myrtle trees and said, We have patrolled the earth, and behold, all the earth remains at rest. So these are 4 other horsemen who are given the responsibility of patrolling the earth and then reporting to the Lord what they see. And their report at this time is that the whole world is at rest. Okay, so there's a lot of angelic activity that goes on in the Bible, and it would be actually a very interesting study to really dive deep into this topic of angels and the things they do. In Revelation chapter 1, we're told about one like a son of man that we know of is Christ. Even though it doesn't say that it's Christ, we know it's him because he says about himself that he died and behold, he's alive forevermore. And he is in possession of the keys of death and Hades. It doesn't say that he's in possession of the keys to death and to Hades as though they were places, but they're the keys that belong to death, as if he were an entity, and the keys that belong to Hades as if it were a controlling entity. And I think that these two are actual spiritual beings that control death and control Hades. But once Christ died and rose from the dead, he took the keys of death and Hades, so that now he is responsible for who dies, when, who can go into the realm of the dead, who can't, who can descend into that place where, spirits go. It's called Hades or Sheol. Christ is in control of all of that. And it's part of the reason why when the fifth trumpet sounds and those beings come out of the pit and they start torturing men, that people want to die, but they can't die. Why can't they die? It's because Jesus won't let them. He won't let them die. It's not time for them to die. If they were to die at that time, that would mean then that whatever fallen entity, was torturing that person could then assume that person's body. And that cannot happen until after the beast is the first fruits of the dead. Apollyon has to indwell that first person who dies. And that will actually take place on Passover according to the day counts and the feast days that we read about in the Bible. So Christ has the keys of death and Hades. He has lots of keys. He has the keys of David as well. And he's the one who controls who dies and who goes where. And death and Hades operate underneath Christ, and they have to report to him, and they can only do what he allows or grants them permission to do. So we know that death and Hades are going to remain active during the millennium. That is, people are going to die and their souls or spirits are going to go into the place of the dead. But once the millennium is over and the great white throne judgment takes place and all the dead have basically been removed from Hades and people are no longer going to be dying, death as the angel over death, and Hades, who is the entity over the place of the dead, the realm of the dead, they will both be cast into the lake of fire. They will no longer be useful. So there's actually three fallen or three wicked, if you want to call it that, wicked entities who will be permitted to continue on after Christ returns at his second coming. Satan will be chained in a pit. He won't be allowed to do anything during the millennium. Death and Hades will still be operational. But because Christ has the keys to death and Hades, everybody has to do what he says. And then at the end of the millennium, both of those, along with Satan, will be cast into the lake of fire. So let's take a look at the red horse. Revelation 6, verse 3. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come," and out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword. So red is the color of blood and death, and in this case, it actually comes from a Greek word that's associated with fire. And this rider on the horse was given permission. That is, he was permitted. This is not that he's not commanded to do something. He's actually granted permission. This is something that he's been wanting to do, that he's been chomping at the bit to do. And when Christ opens the seal, the living creature who calls out that horseman will give permission. He'll grant permission for that rider to take peace from the earth, and that people would slay one another. So when it comes time for that 10 days of persecution that the harlot's going to do, the harlot and the earth dwellers are going to be killing Christians. This is part of that will kind of continue from the time that we're raptured, and it will just continue and really come to a head at the time of that fifth seal, death of the martyrs by the millions. Peace will be taken from the earth. So right now there is a kind of peace on the earth. There aren't people killing each other everywhere. You don't go outside and run the risk of somebody, killing you, at least not here where I live in Idaho. But once this time comes and we're actually in heaven, we're raptured, and Christ begins to open the seals, I believe that the first 4 seals will all be opened on that same day. And the world is going to enter a time that it has never seen before, when there is no peace on earth anywhere. It'll be granted to take peace from the earth, and it's going to be given a sword, a great sword, a mega sword. This is a sword that's used, according to the Strong's Concordance, to butcher, to sacrifice. It's to slaughter or maim. This is like indiscriminate butchering of people. So once this seal is opened and peace is removed from the earth, there is a black horse rider that comes out next, verse 5. And when he opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be the voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine." Okay, the wheat and the barley were the food of the common person, and the lower classes ate the barley because that was cheaper. There's a time coming when it will take a whole day's wages to be able to get just a quart or 4 cups of wheat, which isn't hardly enough to feed one person, let alone a family. Or you can get 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and a denarius is a day's wages. And then the voice that's from within the midst of the 4 living creatures says, "Don't harm the oil and wine." Okay, oil and wine are associated with gladness and rejoicing, and I don't know that the common person is going to be rejoicing or eating food that has oil. I think this is left to the rich, to the elites, to the people who are in power and in control, that whatever food they have is not going to be touched. I think that this rider on the horse is being given the parameters of the extent of what can be allowed with regard to the food on the earth. So it may be that there's actually an angel who's in charge of food and the distribution and the price of food that's on the earth. And that's a very interesting role or place of authority that some entity, angelic or whatever, may actually have. And he's given the parameters. You can't destroy all the food, okay? And the food is going to be at this price, and you can't go any higher and you can't go any lower. It's right here, and it's enough to keep body and soul together for basically one person. And the rich people who have all the, the oil and wine, they get to keep it all. Okay, so that's how this goes. And whose voice is it that's in the midst of the living creatures that gives this parameter? Well, I think it's the voice of Christ. He's the one who received the commission from his Father. He is the one who is now in control of the things that are happening. Then we are told about the pale horse, and there's another horse that rides right after him. That is Hades. Verse 7, when he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword, and with famine, and with pestilence, and by wild beasts of the earth. So the color of the pale horse is actually kind of a sickly shade of green, like that of decaying flesh, if you will. And Death is the rider of the 4th horse, and there is another horse that follows him that isn't actually counted, and this is Hades. So death is actually an entity over having people die, I guess. And Hades is the principality who is over the place of the dead, Hades or Sheol. And death and Hades are given authority over a fourth of the earth. Now, that doesn't mean that a fourth of the earth's population is going to die. What it means is they're given authority over a fourth of the area of the earth, and in that fourth of the area of the earth, there are people who are going to be dying by the sword, which is actually a different sword than the one that the red horse rider is given. This is a sword or a scimitar. It's a big sword. It's the kind that Christ is going to carry in that he has actually coming out of his mouth in Revelation 19. And they're given authority over killing with a sword, with killing people with famine, death by hunger and starvation, with pestilence, which is actually the word for death there, killing people with death. And that's interesting that it's translated as pestilence or plagues. And lastly, by wild beasts, animals that have gone rogue. And even though, like I said, they're given authority over the fourth of the earth, it's not a given that everybody who's in that fourth of the part of the earth is going to die. So we know that wherever there is war, there is always disease, there's famine, there's pestilence, civil unrest, and death. And once the rider on the red horse comes out and takes peace from the earth, it just follows that the rest of these things are going to happen, which is why there's a limit that's put on how much food can be destroyed. It's not like 100%. There's going to be some that's spared. And there's a limit that's put on the extent of the amount of the earth that death and Hades can basically have a free-for-all in, with killing people with famine, pestilence, plagues, wild beasts, and so on. So wherever there's war, though, there is going to be death. There's going to be lots and lots of death, and it happens really fast. It's not like you get the rider on the red horse coming out taking peace from the earth, and then it takes a couple years before there's famines and another couple years before disease and pestilence. This stuff happens like within days of each other. Okay, within days, people are dying from bad water, from diseases, from plagues, and it doesn't take long for the food to all be gone, and within another couple of weeks, people are dying of starvation. This stuff happens really fast. And I think that's why the first four seals are all opened at once. And once they're opened, all this stuff happens basically back to back. It happens really fast. So the rider on the red horse is going to be given permission. He's going to be allowed to take peace from the whole earth, not just a fourth of it, but from the whole earth. And this speaks not only of basically a world at war, which I think is something that we can actually see on the horizon, but all the different factions of people, ethnicities, and genders, and really we're so divided up into our own little groups that it's easy to see how once peace is taken from the earth, that different factions will begin fighting and warring with one another, and not just in one location, but it will be a worldwide phenomenon. And the rider on the black horse has his instructions about the amount of food and the price of food during that time. And the rider on the pale horse, death and Hades, are going to be given authority over a fourth of the earth. And they're going to oversee the violent deaths of populations by sword and wild beasts, and the less violent and very traumatic and sad deaths by famine and by disease. And all of this will begin on the day that we are raptured. Okay, right here. And so in the beginning of Revelation, when Jesus tells John that these things are going to happen quickly, this is kind of what he means, that everything is going to happen kind of all at once. There isn't this, linear unfolding of, seal 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. It's all of these things happening all at once. There are multiple storylines that are happening all at once, and these things happen all at once. And so by the time we get to the fifth seal, which is, we're just talking a few months later, we're going to see the death of millions and millions of Christians. There will be this huge divide between people who are keeping the testimony of Jesus. And remember, the testimony of Jesus is the book of Revelation. Okay, this is the testimony of Jesus. It's the spirit of prophecy. This book is the testimony. And I've done videos on what is the testimony. People who believe in the book of Revelation are going to be persecuted and killed because they believe it's true. All right. So all of these things are going to happen very, very quickly. In addition to that, the first 4 trumpets of Revelation chapter 8 are going to be blown on the same day, the very same day. And that's something that we're going to look at next in this series on Revelation chapter by chapter. We'll be jumping basically from Revelation chapter 6, we'll be going into chapter 8. And then later on, we're talking about the fifth seal martyrs. We'll have to go back into Revelation 6 again. Be sure and check out the description box. They have a lot of things, a lot of resources for you. There are timelines and websites and all kinds of really great resources that are available for you. And then also check my playlists. Anything that's in a playlist is something that I think is a valuable series that really everybody needs to watch. And in particular, I think The Days of Noah is a video series that people should watch. Everybody should watch. All Christians should watch this video series, maybe even watch it a few times. So anyway, leave me a comment and we'll see you on another video. Till then, have a blessed day.